Hello and welcome to this video module today on the ROMA for Boards training series. Today we are focusing on the community needs assessment process and specifically focusing on what board members need to know about this process. The objectives of this video today will be to help the board identify what they need to know, how do they find out, and what does it all mean. So our presenters for today, we have three different presenters that are going to be participating in this video module. From left to right, myself, Courtney Kohler, I'm a senior associate with the National Community Action Partnership. We also have Dr. Barbara Mooney, and she is the director for the Association of Nationally Certified ROMA Trainers and Implementers, and also a learning community subject matter expert for the National Community Action Partnership. And then to the right, we also have Dr. PJ Davis. She's the treasurer for the National Association for Certified ROMA Trainers and Implementers, and also the president of PJ Davis Associates. So this ROMA for Boards training series is also accompanied by other modules within the series. Today, of course, we're focusing on the community needs assessment. But there are other areas of the ROMA cycle that this training series takes you through. So with this, the series is intended for Community Action Agency board members to develop a deeper understanding of how to help your Community Action Agency increase its capacity and results, as well as how to meet and exceed the organizational standards. So in this series of presentations, we will be identifying the key principles and practices that are part of the performance management system that is unique to CSBG and the Community Action Network. So this system is known as the Results-Oriented Management and Accountability Process, or ROMA. So we will show how the ROMA cycle is embedded into the organizational standards, and we will be making references to the video series. So the first phase of the ROMA cycle we're going to explore is assessment. So you'll see here on your screen the ROMA cycle, and that we're going to be focusing on that first portion of the ROMA cycle, which is assessment. Now, this cycle does continue on, so it does not necessarily stop between evaluation and assessment, which is something we always like to point out. And relating back to the organizational standards, looking at category 3, we want to point out that local control of federal CSBG resources is predicted on regular comprehensive community assessments that take into account the breadth of community needs as well as their partners and resources available in the community to meet those needs. So regular assessment of needs and resources at the community level is really a foundation of community action, and it's a vital management and leadership tool that is used across the organization, agency-wide, and utilized by the community to set the course for both Community Services Block Grant as well as all agency resources. So what is a community needs assessment? So because this process really includes collecting and analyzing a broad array of data and information to develop a comprehensive picture of a particular community, that's really what we're looking at here with the community needs assessment. And it's important that we talk about how we look at this process. So really it is a systematic process for creating a profile of the needs and resources of a given community or target population. It's a process that produces a clear description of the specific causes and conditions of poverty that are facing individuals and families in a given community. And then the community needs assessment also takes into consideration the existing resources available in the community to meet the needs of its residents, those with low incomes, as well as the gaps that are existing within the community that are preventing economic mobility. So basically, the needs assessment should answer, what do you want to know, and then why do you want to know that? So, for example, you will want to know some specifics about poverty issues that are facing your community. Do you have a higher percentage of families in poverty than the rest of the state or nation? Or is the poverty concentrated in specific areas within your service area? And you may also want to know what the people you serve think about their community. So do they have resources they need to have stability in their family? Do they feel safe? And do they think there's opportunities for them to improve their circumstances? So really the purpose of a community needs assessment is to be able to use the information from the local community needs assessment to make sure that each community action agency is focusing its resources on the unique circumstances of their own community. So we want to make sure that we're assessing those existing resources in the community to help avoid duplication of services across the community and also allow the most effective use of the agency's own resources. So as we also know, the community needs assessment is required to do every 3 years as a part of the organizational standards. But we want to go beyond that requirement, and we want to make sure that the community assessment is actually useful for the agency. So there's a very basic premise at play here. Community action is somewhat needs-based, and programs and services in each agency or community should really be adjusted to those unique needs. The assessment process really helps to identify what those adjustments should be for the maximum impact and effect. So we want to look at the picture of the community at the point in time relative to its needs. So this is both real and perceived. We also want to create opportunities for community members to more closely examine their geographic area and consider how it fits into the local region. And then lastly, we want to provide a look at the why behind the obvious circumstances. So we're going to start looking at some of the different elements of the needs assessment process. So first and foremost, we want to look at the idea of community. And really the community is defined by the agency doing the assessment. So each agency has to identify what the community is that they are assessing, as well as what the population of people are that they're assessing. And so the focus of the assessment should be on the low-income population of the community, but it's important to know what norms are identified in the community as well. So this points to the idea that we shouldn't just be surveying or gathering information from only customers. Most often the assessments are done for the service area that the agency covers, and sometimes these may include counties, they might represent both urban and rural areas, each with very different needs. But figuring out how to handle these differences should be included in the plan. So after the data is collected, it must be arranged in a way to make it easy to look at the data from the different communities. So whenever we're gathering data about the community, we will want to look at the whole community. So then you will want to sort out the data that is specifically about individuals and families with low income. We also want to make sure there's a clear picture of who is poor in the community. What are their demographics? Does the poverty impact a particular age group? Does it impact a particular racial group? And what do we need to do about that? What trends are we seeing that guide us to what strategies we're going to be looking at later? So next we want to ask who will be involved in conducting the assessment. We want to identify and assemble a diverse assessment team, and this includes board members or a committee of the board. We also want to identify what role each team member will play in the assessment process. So it's important for board members to participate in the assessment process, and we want to make sure that it's clear what roles they can take in the process. Some boards create a committee that works with staff to put together a plan for the assessment process. And it's a really good idea to have that plan. We suggest that you establish an assessment team of some kind that will develop a plan before you get started with the needs assessment process. There's also additional information about actually conducting a needs assessment, and this is just an overview of the process. Board members represent different sectors of community, and they bring such a range of experience, perspectives, and knowledge. And so this is why it's so important for board members to be involved in the needs assessment process, beyond just simply accepting and reviewing the assessment in the end. So board members' opinions in the form of survey responses can help to really enrich the data that's collected, and they may be able to gather surveys from partners, businesses, policymakers, or others more easily than staff can. And then also we want to look at the different parts to the assessment. So first of all, we look at gathering appropriate quantitative or statistical data. Then we also look at gathering qualitative data, which is really looking at what are people saying about this, how do we explore the statistical data more and get those narratives, themes, and perceptions. Then we also have importance on understanding the resources and assets that are in the community. And lastly, we want to make sure we also consider agency data as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to PJ Davis, and she's going to talk about gathering quantitative and qualitative data.
Thank you, Courtney. So in quantitative data, we're talking about statistics and what statistics are important, but not only what are important, but how are they going to be presented so they make sense to us. Quantitative data is data that is expressed in numbers. It can be shown in pictures, maps, charts, etc. There are lots of ways to get statistics. The U.S. Census Department publishes all its data, so it can be used to create a profile of your community. You can find out how many people own their homes versus those who rent, how many families have one or two parents in the household with children, and many more statistics. But sometimes it's hard to understand these numbers. A program called Community Commons was created to help make access to the data more user-friendly. It's possible to download charts, graphs, and maps or other visualization tools that will help you. For instance, if you find that the majority of people with low income are found in the northwest section of your service area, you would want to work on getting your services out there so they can be easily accessible to the people in need. If there's limited transportation, you would want to locate your main office or your primary service sites in places where access is not difficult. If you find areas where there are no low-cost grocery stores or stores where fresh produce is available, that may prompt a community-level strategy to be established. So let's talk about sorting quantitative data. How do various data points interconnect? Quantitative data can be sorted to bring different elements together, such as high poverty and low education, or health indicators in poverty, or housing patterns in low-income communities. To make the data useful, it must be analyzed in some fashion, turning it into information. You'll want to know how different data points interconnect. For example, as you may suspect, the data show that areas where the adults have limited education are those of high poverty. Some health indicators, like low birth weight, instances of asthma, use of the emergency room for health care, can also be mapped to coincide with particular neighborhoods or areas. For instance, there's a special table creator using American Housing Survey data that create custom tables to find out how many families with children ages 5 to 17 have asthma in low-income communities as compared with a higher-income community. So how do housing patterns differ in low-income and middle-income communities, or home ownership, or absentee landlords? Your assessment plan will help you identify what data you want to collect to answer the questions about the needs in your community. What needs are reflected for each domain, for the service list in the National Theory of Change. To help you make meaning of the data, you will need some additional types of data. Let's take a look at qualitative data. It isn't enough just to have numbers to show the scope of the issue. You also need to add a human component to your assessment to find out the depth of the issue, to find out what matters to people. You have to ask them what they think. So just having quantitative data isn't enough. You have to understand what data means to the people who are living and working in that community. So you have to ask them what they think. This is about asking open-ended questions, not just giving people a list of items to select from, but actually giving them a chance to talk about what they know. As a board member, you should look at the surveys that are being given out and ask yourself if the questions will tell you specifics about the needs of the community, or will it just say, housing is a need? That's not enough for you to know what the issue really is about housing. Housing prices are high in the area. Housing is limited. Homes of the elderly are in need of repairs so they can stay there. These would each prompt a different response. So getting input. We get input from a variety of locations: customers and other residents with low income, members of other organizations, business people, people who work in the community. So who do you ask? Some agencies ask their own customers about the issues they face in the community, and that's very valuable, but they aren't the only people to ask. What are other service providers who work with low-income population saying? What does the business community have to say? You want to know what your partners, other human service providers, think and want to do about the issues. You want to know what policymakers think about the issues and what they think you should be doing. Business owners can weigh in on many important topic areas: need for education and training, reasons why they have experienced employee turnover, how they feel about living wage and benefit packages for their employees. You will get different information from each of these different sectors. So talking about customer input about community needs, it's helpful to ask your customers to identify their own needs and the resources they think would help them, and ask them what the community at large needs from the perspective of someone who lives in the community. What are people in low income saying about their community? If you want to find out what it means to individuals and families living and working in that community, you have to ask them. How do they manage to pay for high-cost housing, those that are more than 1/3 of their income? Would they be willing to move if they could find less expensive apartment, one that was safer or more energy efficient? What resources would they need to make such a move? Are these resources available? These issues can all be identified as individual or family needs, as they will be addressed on a one-at-a-time basis. Customers can identify community crime and safety issues, increasing impact of substance abuse, environment concerns, or problems of limited access to resources that they have experienced. This slide refers to customer input, and we'll talk about customer satisfaction in a couple of minutes. But according to Organizational Standard 6.4, customer satisfaction data and customer input collected as part of the community assessment is included in the strategic planning process. But it's not enough just to ask customers what they need or what they see is needed. You must ask other community members and low-income people who are not your customers, including outreach to low-income communities. It is an important part of the assessment process. So let's talk about customer satisfaction. How is the agency doing? What does the agency need? In addition to asking customers what they need, you must ask them to tell you about their experiences with your organization. In asking about customer satisfaction, you'll also want to ask your customers if they were satisfied with the services they received from your agency. How were they treated? Did they value the service? Did it help them? How did it help them? Customers' responses to questions about how satisfied they are with the service they received is an excellent source of identification of agency-level needs. If customers have an issue with the amount of time it took for them to get service or had trouble getting the service getting to the service site, that will let them know that you must identify either new resources or new ways of using your existing resources. If customers praise your staff, the way they were respected during service, the ease of accessing the service, that will let you know you must maintain your resources to continue those particular programs and providing that particular level of service. It's important to look at the needs in assessment, but it's also important to look at what resources and assets are currently available, what is already there, and then where are the gaps. So in identifying resources, we look at the resources in the entire community, not just what your organization provides. What resources are available already to meet the needs you are finding? Who else is providing those? Where are they? Are the resources located in the same areas where needs are identified? Are they accessible to your customers? Are your customers eligible for those resources, and are they easy to access? You can use the mapping tools to find out where the resources are located. Other community agencies, specific program resources such as food, housing, education, and financial resources. There are other resources available to meet the needs you have identified. Are any of the resources you currently use as referral sources for your customers at risk? Are they threatened? Are any new resources being developed or emerging? So now I'll turn it over to Barbara for agency data.
Thanks, PJ. When you look at the resources in your community, one of the resources is your own agency. And your agency has this incredible wealth of data, and it really can help you when you're creating a profile of your community. You might find that in a certain community, nobody has said they need early childhood services. And that could be because your agency is providing a Head Start center there. So using your agency data is important so that you can include understanding in situations like this one. It also helps you to identify specifics about the people who came to your agency for services. So the demographics of the people who were served, like their age or their location, their network. The statistical data that your agency is already gathering for reporting shouldn't just be used for reporting. It should also be used in the assessment process. You know that how many people were served, some information about them, you know what services they received and what outcomes they achieved as a part of that data that the agency collects. And another thing that you know is you can see which of your facilities are being used by your customers. Which of the services are most often used. And this can help you as you try to figure out how to use your resources in better ways. In order to know what you're going to be able to do going forward, you would want to look at your fiscal data too, see if there are any unencumbered amounts that you'll be able to use in the new programming year. That's a resource that would be available for your community. And you'd look at your agency-wide reports, audit reports, and program-specific reports as well. So remember when we started this discussion, when Courtney started us out, she said, what do you want to know and why do you want to know it? And so that's important for us to come back to. Assuming that you've collected all of the data that we just talked about, what do you know? Did the data that you collect provide you with answers to your questions? Do you have a clear picture of the conditions facing the people in your community? Do you know what's causing those conditions? Are there really big community needs that are preventing or that are limiting progress of the people you serve? Crime, opioid crises, crumbling housing and infrastructure. And does the agency have issues that are limiting their actions, like there aren't enough facilities in certain locations, or staff doesn't have the right training or the right skills? So do you understand what needs the agency is going to be able to address? And that's your next step, is to try to make meaning out of this data. The data should be turned into information by the staff or by the assessment team, and they'll present it to you so that you can do your job as board members, and your job is to understand the assessment data. So all of the kinds of data that Courtney and PJ and I have just talked about, you have to understand that. It's up to you to say what you're going to be able to do next. And and how clear is the assessment report that you get? Is it a lot of information and it's hard for you to understand as the board member? So one way for you to get the information is to ask for an executive summary. And that would identify all the different data sources and some key findings. And it should also have recommendations, which would include what we're calling clearly stated needs. And this is going to help you identify the needs that are specific to the individuals and families in your community. And it's also going to help you identify the needs which are affecting everyone in the community, and help you identify what your agency needs are, which we just talked about. So consider the housing example that PJ mentioned earlier. You may find there isn't much affordable housing in your low-income neighborhood. And the cost of formerly affordable housing has been dramatically risen over the past 5 years. So you can tell that this is a community level need which everyone in the community is going to be affected by. So this will have to be addressed by creating more housing units. You can't solve that by helping individual families, by giving individual families rental assistance. What if you find that the populations that need services aren't physically located near any of your agency's current service sites? So that may identify an agency level need to develop some alternative delivery methods. So having this list of clearly identified needs will help the board sort through the assessment data. And then as you look at those things that are in the executive summary, the key findings and the recommendations, you're going to be saying, do we have enough information? Do we know what services we're going to be able to provide? Part of what you're going to do as a board is help to prioritize what those needs are. Not every need is going to be a priority for your own agency, even if it's important for the community. So you might not have the resources to address the need that everybody said was their top priority. So you might have to think of other ways to partner or other kinds of resources to do. But it's going to be up to you to consider how to transform this complexity of all of the needs that you see, and help to prioritize the needs that are going to be addressed next year by your agency. So some things to consider are how the board makes those leadership decisions, who's responsible, what happens if there are different opinions. Those are all things that you need to consider as you look at this assessment data. So finally, I'm just going to give you a couple of bullet points to take away about taking action, things that you can do as a board. One thing is to strive to have an agency-wide comprehensive community needs assessment rather than a single program assessing their needs, but to look at the agency's needs or the larger community's needs. And then to approve this comprehensive document and record the board action. That's going to be important as you want to prove that you're meeting the organizational standards. And then identify a planning committee, because that's the group that's now going to take the assessment data and develop the agency-wide strategic plan, which we're going to talk about in another segment, and also how you might use this data to inform your local theory of change, which we'll also talk about later. So that's the end of this particular segment. I'll turn it back over to Courtney to close.
All right. Well, thank you, Barbara, and thank you also, PJ. We also appreciate you all that are listening in as local agency board members for viewing this video. We appreciate your time and service to community action. And as we close this video, we just want to leave you with some resources and contact information that you can see there in the video screen. And we hope that you will tune in to the other video segments of the ROMA for Boards training series. Thank you.